Hi everyone, so today we're going to be going over rational expressions, okay? Before we go into the questions, let's talk about non-permissible values. We're going to first talk about non-permissible values. What's the meaning of this? Okay. Well guys, the first thing you should know is if you have any number and you divide it by 0, it's going to make it undefined. Anytime you have a denominator of 0, it's going to be undefined, means you won't really have a proper answer for that. Now, it could be any number. It could be 5 over 0, 7 over 0, anything over 0. They're all undefined, okay? Anytime your denominator is 0, your expression will become undefined. So essentially, you never want to make your denominator equal to 0. You don't want to have your denominator equal to 0. Whenever that is going to be equal to 0, you will get your non-permissible value. So we'll start off with a really simple example. What if I give you an expression of 1 over x? And I ask you, what's the non-permissible value? So you're going to say, okay, my non-permissible value is when my denominator is going to be equal to 0. What's my denominator here? It's x. So you're going to say when x is equal to 0, that's when you're going to have a non-permissible value. So the non-permissible value for 1 over x is x cannot be equal to 0. Essentially, you will say x cannot be equal to 0, because if x is equal to 0, this whole expression becomes 1 over 0, which will make it undefined. Okay? So you have a non-permissible value at x equals to 0. Now, what if I had given you 1 over x minus 2? Well, you're going to say the same thing. Your denominator cannot be equal to 0, so you would say x minus 2 cannot be equal to 0. Now, we need to isolate x, so we're going to move negative 2 to the other side. When it goes to the other side, it's going to become positive. So the answer is x cannot be equal to positive 2. That's a non-permissible. Okay, let's do another example. What if I give you x plus 7? So what's the non-permissible for this? You're going to take your denominator, which is x plus 7. You say it cannot be equal to 0. So plus 7 goes to the other side, becomes minus 7. And that is your non-permissible value. Moving forward, you should be quickly able to do this in your mind, folks. All you do is you switch the sign for this and say x cannot be equal to 2. Same for this. You switch the sign, you say x cannot be equal to negative 7. Now, let me give you a few more examples. I want to see if you guys can quickly tell me the non-permissible value. What if I give you 1 over 7 minus x? Well, you see, it's written a bit differently, right? You take a denominator, which is 7 minus x. You say it cannot be equal to 0. Now, rather than moving 7, this x has a negative. I should move it instead. So you move negative x to the other side, you get x cannot be equal to 7. You usually want to write your variable in front. Okay. Moving forward, what you should do is you say, okay, 7 minus x. Negative x goes to the other side, you get x cannot be equal to 7. Okay, so you should be able to do this quite quickly. Now, sometimes they might give you multiple variables such as a, b, c. So now you have 3 variables. You would say first, your a cannot be equal to 0, your b cannot be equal to 0, and your c cannot be equal to 0. So if you have multiple variables, you need to tackle each one of them. Okay, let me give you a couple more examples. What if I give you 5 over x minus 2 and y plus 7? So you're going to say first, x minus 2 cannot be equal to 0. When you isolate your x, you get x cannot be equal to 2. That's your first non-permissible value. Then you take your second denominator, which is y plus 7, and you say it cannot be equal to 0. So plus 7 goes to the other side, becomes minus 7. That's your second non-permissible value. So in this case, you have 2 non-permissible values because you had 2 factors in the denominator. Are you guys following it so far? Okay, let me give you another one here. Now, what if I give you x squared minus 9? Well, you should realize that I can write x squared minus 9 as x squared minus 3 squared. Now, this right here reminds you of difference of square. Guys, you should know your difference of square formula. A squared minus b squared is going to be a plus b times a minus b. Remember this formula, it's your difference of square, okay? I'm just going to leave it over here. And then what would you do? Well, you're going to say, I can factor that further because this resembles a square minus b square. So it'll be a plus b times a minus b, which means it'll be 1 over x plus 3 times x minus 3. You see, you have two denominators. For the first one, you have x plus 3, so plus 3 goes to the other side. What will it become? It will become minus 3. So x cannot be equal to minus 3. That's the non-permissible for that. For x minus 3 goes to the other side, becomes plus 3. X cannot be equal to 3. So these two are your non-permissible values. Okay, pretty straightforward, folks. Okay, pretty straightforward. Let's get into the examples now. Let's get into the examples. Okay, I'm going to write down a few examples. I want you guys to quickly tell me what are the non-permissible values. I have x minus 1 over x plus 2 times x minus 3. What's the non-permissible for x plus 2? Imagine plus 2 moving to the other side. X cannot be minus 2. For x minus 3, imagine minus 3 moving to the other side. X cannot be 3. You have two non-permissibles. You only look at your denominators, folks. Okay, you only look at your denominators and you make them equal to 0. And then you isolate the variable. Okay, quite simple. So that was my first example. Everyone, can you tell me the non-permissible value for this? Let's go. I want you guys to give me the answer. You have less than 30 seconds. Okay, guys, so let's have a look at this. What you would do is, you see the top will say as 2y squared. The bottom, y squared minus 4, can be written as y squared minus 2 squared. That resembles a difference of squares, right? That resembles the difference of square formula. So y squared minus 2 squared will just be y plus 2 times y minus 2. So the first one is y plus 2. What's your non-permissible for that? Y cannot be equal to minus 2. Second one is y minus 2. You have y cannot be equal to plus 2. Just remember, when they move to the other side, they're going to switch sign, okay? So you got these two non-permissible values. Moving forward, after practice, you should be able to do this quickly in your mind. Okay, let me give you an example now. We've got 3x minus 6 at the top, and at the bottom we have 2x squared plus x minus 10. Question says, simplify this and write the non-permissible values. Guys, whenever you get a question like this, what you want to do is you want to factor everything fully. At the top, I have 3x minus 6. How can I factor that? What can I factor out of those two terms? We can factor the 3 out. So what would that be? That would be 3 times x minus 2. Okay, that was quite easy. The bottom one is your quadratic equation. How do we factor a quadratic equation? We take the number in front of x squared and we multiply it by the last number. So 2 times minus 10 will give you minus 20. Now we want to find two numbers. When you multiply them, you get minus 20. When you add them, you get this number, which is plus 1. I know it would be some combination of 5 and 4, but I want the sum to be plus 1, so it should be 5 and minus 4. But don't forget, whenever there's a number in front of x squared, we need to divide these terms by that number. We need to divide this by 2 and divide this by 2. This becomes 5 over 2. Leave it as a fraction, and minus 4 over 2 is just going to be minus 2. So guys, whenever you have a fraction like 5 over 2, how do you write it as a factor? The number at the bottom, the number which is the denominator, it lands in front of x, so it becomes 2x. And what's left at the top? Plus 5, so you put plus 5. This number right here is minus 2, so that's simple. You just write x minus 2. Okay, this is the shortcut method. I want you to get super comfortable with this, okay? So whenever you find the numbers, if there's a number other than 1 in front of x squared, you divide it by those. If it's a fraction, leave it as a fraction. The number at the bottom lands in front of x. Then you have plus 5 at the top, so you write plus 5. For this is simple. This is just going to be x minus 2. Okay, so we fully factored the top and the bottom. Now, before you cancel, you need to write your non-permissibles. For 2x plus 5, you would say 2x plus 5 cannot be equal to 0. So first move plus 5 to the other side. It becomes minus 5. Then divide both sides by 2. So x cannot be equal to minus 5 over 2. That's your non-permissible value number 1. For x minus 2, that's easy. You just say x cannot be equal to positive 2. That's your non-permissible value number 2. And then you can cancel. You see x minus 2 divided by x minus 2. You can cancel that. And after canceling, what are you left with? After canceling, you're left with just 3 over 2x plus 5. So there you go, guys. You've simplified this, and you've written the non-permissible values. Okay, make sure you know how to do that. Let's try the next question. So in the next question, we have 2y squared plus y minus 10. And we're dividing that by y squared plus 3y minus 10. Okay, so again, we want to simplify this, and we want to write the non-permissible values. So let's simplify the top, factor the top. We have a quadratic equation. So 2 times minus 10 gives you what? That gives you minus 20. I need to find two numbers. When you multiply them, you get, when you add them, you get 1. What would those numbers be? It would be some combination of 5 and 4, but I want the sum to be plus 1, so it'll be 5 and minus 4. But don't forget, there's the number 2 in front of y squared, so we need to divide this by 2. So this will become 5 over 2, and that will just be minus 2. So guys, what's my factor for the top going to be? This 5 over 2, 2 at the bottom will land in front of y, so we get 2y. At the top, you have plus 5. Then we have minus 2, that would just be y minus 2. So we factor the top, let's factor the bottom now, okay? So what's the number in front of y squared? What's the number in front of y squared, folks? That's 1. And we multiply that by the number at the end. 1 times minus 10 will give you minus 10. We want to find two numbers. When you multiply them, you get minus 10. When you add them, you get 3. I know it will be some combination of 5 and 2. I want the sum to be positive 3, so it'll be 5 and minus 2. So my factors at the bottom are going to be y plus 5 and y minus 2. Now, before we cancel anything, we should write the non-permissibles. For y plus 5, you would say y cannot be minus 5. For y minus 2, you say y cannot be equal to 2, and then you cancel. So y minus 2 cancels with y minus 2, and your simplified expression will just be 2y plus 5 divided by y plus 5. And these right here are your non-permissible values. Pretty simple. Okay, so far so good. Let's try another example. We've got 6 minus 2m divided by m squared minus 9. So I realize the bottom is difference of squares, because I can write this as m squared minus 3 squared, right? So when you factor the bottom, what would you get? When you factor the bottom, m squared minus 3 squared becomes m plus 3 times m minus 3. Okay, that was simple. Now what can I do from the top? You see, you can say I have 6, I have 2, so we can factor the 2 out. When you factor the 2 out, this will become 3 minus m. But then you say, okay, at the bottom I have not 3 minus m, but I have m minus 3 and m plus 3. So what we should do is we should actually factor a negative as well. Okay, so rather than factoring 2, we should have actually factored, you know, what you can do is you can rewrite this as minus 2m plus 6. You know, you're just rearranging them. And then you factor the negative 2 out. When you factor negative 2, left with m, the sign's going to change. It's going to become minus, and 6 divided by 2 will give you 3. Now it's kind of making sense. But before you cancel anything, let's write the non-permissibles. For m plus 3, the non-permissible will be m cannot be minus 3. For m minus 3, you would say m cannot be equal to 3. And then m minus 3 cancels. And you're going to be left with minus 2 divided by m plus 3. Does that make sense? Does anyone have a question here? Okay. Every single person, I want you to do the next question yourself. Let's go. I'm going to ask one of you guys for the answer afterwards. We've got 25x squared minus 4y squared divided by 10x minus 4y. I want you to factor this. I want you to give me the non-permissible value. Let's go. Okay, guys, let's have a look at this question. Firstly, when I look at the top, I realize we can turn that into difference of squares. 25 is 5 squared. So we can rewrite this as 5x whole square. 4 can be written as 2 squared. So we can rewrite this as 2y whole square. And at the bottom, we can factor the 2 out. And you'd be left with 5x minus 2y. Okay, so the top resembles difference of square, which is a square minus b square, which is a plus b times a minus b. So that would just be 5x plus 2y times 5x minus 2y. And at the bottom, you've got 2 times 5x minus 2y. Before you cancel anything, we should write the non-permissible. How do we do that? You take your denominator, which is 5x minus 2y, and you say it cannot be equal to 0. Let's move the minus 2y to the other side. It becomes positive 2y. Now, guys, over here, it's up to you. You can either isolate x or isolate y. Doesn't really matter. So if you want to isolate y, you divide everything by 2, right? If you want to isolate y, you divide everything by 2. And you get y cannot be equal to 5x over 2. Okay, so you could have written it like this, or you could have isolated your x. It doesn't really matter. You had this. You could have divided both sides by 5, and you could have had x cannot be equal to 2y over 5. Either or would have worked. Okay, so we've written the non-permissible, and now we can cancel 5x minus 2y, 5x minus 2y, and my simplified expression is 5x plus 2y divided by 2. Do you guys understand this? Okay, pretty simple concept. Okay, guys, now we're going to talk about multiplying and dividing. Before we get into the complicated questions, I want to make sure you guys understand the basics. If I give you 3 over minus 4 and I ask you to multiply this by 1 over 2, it's quite easy. You just multiply the top terms. 3 times 1, it gives you 3. And you multiply the bottom terms. Minus 4 times 2 gives you minus 8. Move the negative to the top, so it's minus 3 over 8. Quite simple. Okay, if I give you something like 5 over 8, multiply that by minus 4 over 15. Okay, we can do the multiplication, but we have to realize we can simplify this. 5 and 15 can be canceled. 5 divided by 5 is 1. 15 divided by 5 is 3. 4 divided by 4 is 1. 8 divided by 4 is 2. So at the top, you have 1 times minus 1, which is minus 1. At the bottom, you have 2 times 3, which is 6. So answer will be minus 1 over 6. Now, if they ever give you 2 over 3 divided by 3 over 4, you should say it's going to be 2 over 3, and now you change the division to multiplication. When you do that, you just flip the second term, so it becomes 4 over 3. Now you multiply the top, 4 times 2 gives you 8, and bottom, 3 times 3 gives you 9. Answer is 8 over 9. Let's try another one. You see, sometimes they might write it differently. Sometimes they might say you have 2 over 5 divided by minus 1 over 10. So you would say it's 2 over 5, but now instead of this division, I put multiplication. And the bottom term is going to flip. So minus 10, always move the negative to the top. 10 goes to the top, 1 goes to the bottom. Before you multiply, you can cancel them. 5 divided by 5 is 1. Minus 10 divided by 5 is minus 2. So at the top, we have 2 times minus 2, which is minus 4 divided by 1, which is equal to minus 4. Okay, so these are the basic rules that you should know about multiplication and division for fractions. Now let's get into the questions. First question is quite simple. We have x plus 3 divided by 2 multiplied by x plus 1 divided by 4. Okay, guys, what you would do is you're going to say, I'm going to multiply the top. So x plus 3 times x plus 1. And multiply the bottom. 2 times 4 gives me 8. Let's FOIL it. X times x is x squared. X times 1 is x. 3 times x is 3x. And 3 times 1 is 3. And at the bottom, we have 8. So we get x squared. X plus 3x is 4x. And this is plus 3. At the bottom, we have 8. So that's your answer. Or you always want to make sure that you've written your non-permissible. At the bottom, you just have numbers. So you have no non-permissible value here. Okay. Sometimes if you have a variable, you got to write your non-permissible values. Let's try the next question. So next up, I have 4x squared divided by 3xy. We're multiplying that by y squared divided by 8x. Okay, so let's try to see what can be canceled. Guys, look at this. I've got x squared at the top. X times x at the bottom is going to be x squared as well. So this x squared will cancel with both the x's here. Now I have y squared at the top and y at the bottom. What's going to happen is this y is going to cancel with y squared, and you'll be left with just one y. And we got 4 and 8. 4 divided by 4 is 1. 8 divided by 4 will give you 2. So what do I have at the top? At the top, I'm only left with y. At the bottom, I have 3 times 2, which is 6. But guys, you know what's the most common mistake? People forget to write the non-permissible. In the original, you see you had x at the bottom. So non-permissible is x cannot be 0. You had y at the bottom. You say y cannot be equal to 0. Over here, we had x, but we've already covered that. So my answer is y over 6. That's my simplified version. But don't forget to write the non-permissibles. If you do, you're going to lose half of the marks. Okay, so be careful. Ideally, you want to write your non-permissibles before canceling anything. Okay, let's try another example. We have d divided by 2 pi r. And we're multiplying this with 2 pi rh divided by d minus 2. Okay, so first thing, I realized we got 2 pi r and 2 pi r there. So straight away, we can cancel that. But like I said, before you do any canceling, let's write the non-permissibles. Okay, pi is a number, so there's no non-permissible for that. I see r. So you say r cannot be equal to 0. And then we have d minus 2. So you say d minus 2 cannot be equal to 0. When you isolate your d, you get d cannot be equal to 2. So that's the second, and that's the first non-permissible value.
When you say non-permissible, is it like the same thing as like find the restrictions?
Exactly. Non-permissible, NPV is pretty much your restriction. That's pretty much the value when your denominator becomes 0, which means that's going to make your function undefined. So you don't want to make your function undefined, right? So it's pretty much your restriction. Non-permissible is just another name for restriction. Good question. Okay, so we got the non-permissibles. Now we just got to cancel stuff out. I realized we got 2 pi r and 2 pi r. Boom, gone. Now you see, the most common mistake I see is people try doing this. They say, I can cancel d with d. Guys, no, that would be a rookie mistake. Let me show you why. I have d at the top, and at the bottom I have d minus 2. This is d. This is d minus 2. They're not the same. Okay? Whenever there's a plus or minus with it, they're not the same. So you cannot cancel this d with this d. Nope, that would be the biggest mistake. Yes, if instead of this minus, we had d times 2, then you can cancel the d's. Why? Because this is d and then this is d. Okay, they're the same, so you can cancel them. But if there's a plus or minus at the bottom, you cannot. Why? Because this is d minus 2. It's like saying, if I have 3, and at the bottom I have 3 minus 2, guys, can you cancel this 3 with this 3? Absolutely not. So make sure you don't make that rookie mistake. Okay, so you're going to say, okay, 2 pi r, they were the same. I was able to cancel them. I can't cancel anything more. So my simplified version, at the top, I'm left with dh. At the bottom, I'm left with d minus 2. And the non-permissibles, I've written those already. Do you guys understand this? Okay, if any of you guys have any questions, just let me know. Okay, let's do more complicated stuff. First example, we have y squared minus 9 divided by x cubed minus x. We're multiplying it with x squared minus x. And at the bottom, we have y plus 3. So guys, as a first step, we should factor everything out. The top is y squared minus 9. You can think of this as y squared minus 3 squared. Aha, that's my difference of squares. I can factor this as y plus 3 times y minus 3. So that's quite simple. So let's do that. Let's factor that top over there. We're going to write this as y plus 3 times y minus 3. What about the bottom? Well, I have x cubed minus x, so I see x is common. So I'll be left with x squared minus 1. But guys, look at this. This x squared minus 1 can further be factored. Why? You can think of this as x squared minus 1 squared. That would just be x plus 1 times x minus 1 using your difference of squares. So you're going to say, okay, so I'm going to factor this x squared minus 1 further, and I'm going to rewrite this as x plus 1 times x minus 1. Okay? So we're going to rewrite this as x plus 1 times x minus 1. Quite simple. At the top, I have x squared minus x. You factor the x out, you get x minus 1. Quite simple. At the bottom, we have y plus 3. Okay. Now, guys, we're going to write the non-permissible values before we cancel anything. For x, you say x cannot be equal to 0. For x plus 1, you say x cannot be equal to minus 1. For x minus 1, you say x cannot be plus 1. For y plus 3, you say y cannot be equal to minus 3. And now we can cancel. Y plus 3 divided by y plus 3 cancels. X divided by x cancels. X minus 1 divided by x minus 1 cancels. And after canceling everything, my simplified version is y minus 3 at the top and x plus 1 is at the bottom. And these right here are my non-permissible values. Do you guys understand this? Okay, so essentially what are we doing? We're factoring every term, we're writing the non-permissibles, and we're canceling as much as we can. Okay, everyone, I want you guys to do the next question. Let's go. We got x squared minus x minus 12. Okay, we got x squared minus x minus 12 divided by x squared minus 9. And we're multiplying this with x squared plus 4x, x squared minus 4x plus 3 divided by x squared minus 4x. Let's go, everyone. I want you guys to try this one out. All right, guys, let's have a look at this. So first thing, we need to factor every term. Okay, so what do we have over here at the top? X squared minus x minus 12. How do we factor that? The number in front of x squared is 1. 1 times negative 12 will give you minus 12. We need to find two numbers. When you multiply them, you get minus 12. When you add them, you get minus 1. It'll be minus 4 and 3. So that will just be x minus 4 and x plus 3. Quite simple. Then we have x squared minus 9 at the bottom. We can think of this as x squared minus 3 squared. That will just be x plus 3 times x minus 3. So at the bottom, we will have x plus 3 multiplied by x minus 3. We factor that. Okay, then we have x squared minus 4x plus 3. Let's factor that. X squared has 1 in front, and the number at the end is 3. So 1 times 3 is going to be 3. We want to find two numbers. When you multiply them, you get 3. When you add them, you get minus 4. I know it would be some combination of 3 and 1, but I want the sum to be minus 4, so it'll be minus 3 and minus 1. So that would become x minus 3 multiplied by x minus 1. And then over here, we have x squared minus 4x. You just factor the x out, and you're left with x minus 4. Perfect. We factored everything out now. Now, before we cancel anything, we need to write the non-permissibles. Okay, what's the non-permissible value for x plus 3? You say x cannot be equal to minus 3. For x minus 3, x cannot be equal to plus 3. We have x, so you say x cannot be equal to 0. X minus 4, x cannot be equal to positive 4. And now we're going to cancel. X minus 4 divided by x minus 4. X minus 3 divided by x minus 3. X plus 3 divided by x plus 3. And after canceling, what am I left with? I'm left with x minus 1 divided by x. And these right here are my non-permissible values. Do you guys understand this? Any questions so far, folks? Okay, good. Okay, guys, now the next one's going to be a bit more challenging because we're going to add some division. We got m squared minus 6m minus 7 divided by m squared minus 49. And we're dividing this with m squared plus 8m plus 7 divided by m squared plus 7m. Okay, so the only thing is I see this division. Let's not worry about this. Let's factor everything out fully first. So we got m squared minus 6m minus 7. So what's the number in front of m squared? 1. And the last number is minus 7. So 1 times minus 7 gives you minus 7. Now we want to find two numbers. When you multiply them, you get minus 7. When you add them, you get minus 6. What do you think those two numbers would be? I know it would be some combination of 7 and 1. Now I want the sum to be minus 6, so it must be minus 7 and plus 1. So factor for that is m minus 7 and m plus 1. And then at the bottom, I have m squared minus 49. We know m squared minus 49 can be written as m squared minus 7 squared, which is going to be m plus 7 times m minus 7 using your difference of squares. So this would be m plus 7 times m minus 7. Leave this as division for now. And now we're going to factor this term right here, m squared plus 8m plus 7. So 1 times 7 gives me 7. I need to find two numbers. When you multiply them, you get 7. When you add them, you get 8. It'll be 7 and 1. So the factor at the top would be m plus 7 times m plus 1. And then for the bottom, that's easy. You just factor the m out and you'll be left with m plus 7. Okay, quite simple. We factored everything out fully. That's our main step. Now, guys, first step right here is write the non-permissibles. For m plus 7, you would say m cannot be minus 7. For m minus 7, you would say m cannot be plus 7. For m, you would say m cannot be 0. M plus 7, m cannot be minus 7. I've already covered that, so we don't need to worry about that. Okay, guys, here's what I want you to remember. When you have division, you write your non-permissible before flipping. And then what we're going to do is we're going to change this division to multiplication. So we have m minus 7, m plus 1, divided by m plus 7 times m minus 7. We're going to change this division to multiplication. And now what's going to happen? These terms are going to flip. M times m plus 7 comes to the top. And m plus 7 times m plus 1 comes to the bottom. You see, because we have new terms come at the bottom, let's double check the non-permissibles for those which have just come to the bottom. I have m plus 7. For that, we have m cannot be minus 7. I've already covered that. For m plus 1, m cannot be equal to minus 1. Have I written that? No, so I need to add that. So this is the most important part when it comes to division, guys. You need to write your non-permissible before the flip and after the flip, okay? You need to cover both of those. That's the tricky part. People often forget that. Okay, so I've written all the non-permissibles, and now we're ready to cancel. We got m plus 7 divided by m plus 7, gone. M plus 1 divided by m plus 1, gone. M minus 7 divided by m minus 7, gone. I'm left with just m at the top. And at the bottom, I have m plus 7. So we have m over m plus 7. That's my simplified answer. And I've written my non-permissible values over there. Does anyone have any questions on this? Okay, should be quite easy. Okay, let's try our next question, guys. Our next question is quite interesting as well. We got 3x plus 12 divided by 3x squared minus 5x minus 12. Then we have division. 12 divided by 3x plus 4. And then we multiply. We got 2x minus 6 divided by x plus 4. Okay, guys, as you know, step number 1, let's factor everything out. I've got 3x plus 12. I can factor the 3 out, and I'll have x plus 4. And then we've got 3x squared minus 5x minus 12. Let me just write it down over here and show you how to factor this. So what you're going to do is you take 3 and you multiply it with minus 12. You get minus 36. I want to find two numbers. When you multiply them, you get minus 36. When you add them, you get minus 5. I know it will be some combination of 9 and 4. I want the sum to be minus 5, so it must be minus 9 and 4. But guys, do not forget, there's a 3 in front of x squared. Whenever that's the case, we need to divide these numbers by that number. So we divide this by 3, we divide this by 3. This becomes minus 3, this becomes 4 over 3. So minus 3 is easy. My factor is going to be just x minus 3. Whenever you have a fraction, the number at the bottom lands in front of x. So it becomes 3x. And I'm left with plus 4. So that's going to be 3x plus 4. So keep that in mind, okay? That's how you're going to factor your tricky questions. So we say, I know how to factor that. It will be x minus 3 and 3x plus 4. We're going to leave this as division for now. And that will just be 12 over 3x plus 4. And from here, we can factor the 2 out. I'll have 2x minus 3. And the bottom is already simplified. It's just x minus 4. So at the bottom, I'll have x plus 4. Okay, perfect. Hardest part is done, guys. You've done the hardest part where we factored everything out. Before we do anything, let's write the non-permissibles. For x minus 3, you say x cannot be equal to 3. For 3x plus 4, guys, you should be able to do this in your mind. This is how you do it. You say plus 4 moves to the other side, becomes minus 4, and then you divide it by 3. So x cannot be minus 4 over 3. Guys, you should be able to do this in your mind after some practice. 3x plus 4, I just covered that. X plus 4, x cannot be minus 4. Okay. And guys, in the next step, we're going to change this division to multiplication. So what happens? So this is going to be 3 times x plus 4 divided by x minus 3 times 3x plus 4. We change this division to multiplication. What happens? The bottom term goes to the top, and the top term comes to the bottom. So we have 3x plus 4 divided by 12. Okay, and this is multiplication, so you're going to leave it as it is. Now, guys, a new term came to the bottom, so always check, do I have a non-permissible for this? Well, this is just a number. It's 12. So there's no non-permissible for that. But you always need to check, because had another variable come to the bottom, then you would have to add that non-permissible value. Okay, so we've done that. We're ready to cancel. I got x plus 4 divided by x plus 4. I got x minus 3 divided by x minus 3. I got 3x plus 4 divided by 3x plus 4. And guys, I've got 3 times 2, which is 6. So I've got 6 at the top, and I've got 12 at the bottom. When you simplify this, you get 1 over 2. And you've written your non-permissible values already. So there you go, folks. This is how you're going to simplify your division and multiplication questions. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, good. Make sure you practice these questions afterwards, okay? Now we're going to do addition and subtraction. We're going to do addition and subtraction. Before we get to that, let's talk about some simple fraction questions. So if I give you 5 over 6 minus 3 over 8, now you guys know by now, you cannot add or subtract your fractions until they have a common denominator. This is 6, this is 8. So we need to have a common denominator. In other words, you want to find a common multiple of 6 and 8, okay? What's a common multiple of 6 and 8? That's 24. So my common denominator is 24. What that means is we want to turn both of these denominators into 24. How would I make 6 into 24? I'll multiply this by 4. And whatever you do to the bottom, you do the same to the top, because you want to maintain the ratio. Okay, how do I turn 8 into 24? I times this by 3, and you do the same to the top. So the top becomes 5 times 4, which is 20, over 24. And 3 times 3 is 9, over 24. Now we have the same denominator, so we can rewrite this as 20 minus 9 over 24. And 20 minus 9 is going to be 11 over 24. Quite simple, very basic. You must have learned this in younger grades. Okay, let's do a couple more examples in case you guys are rusty. So we have minus 2 over 3 plus 4 over 5. My denominator is 3 and it's 5 over here. What's the common multiple of 3 and 5? 15. That means my common denominator is 15. I need to turn both of these guys into 15. How do you turn 3 into 15? You times it by 5, you do the same to the top. You times it by 3, you do the same to the top. So minus 2 times 5 gives me minus 10 over 15. And 4 times 3 is 12 over 15. So you can say this is just minus 10 plus 12 over 15. And minus 10 plus 12 is 2. So you got 2 over 15. Quite simple. Okay, let's work with variables now. We got 7x plus 1 over x plus 5x minus 2 over x. I always like to put brackets, okay? Especially when there's a negative, it's gonna save you from making mistakes. First question, do I have a common denominator? Well, I'm lucky in this case, yes. Both of them have x as a denominator, so that's already common. So you can just blindly add them. 7x plus 1 plus 5x minus 2, all divided by x. What's 7x plus 5x? That's 12x. And 1 minus 2 is going to be minus 1, all divided by x. But do not forget to write the non-permissible values. What's at the bottom? X. So x cannot be equal to 0. Don't forget the non-permissible, folks. Okay? That would be your most common mistake. Good. Let's have a look at a couple more questions. 10y minus 1 divided by 4y minus 3. Minus. Now this minus is for the whole thing, okay? So that's why I put brackets. It's going to be 8 minus 2y divided by 4y minus 3. Now guys, the question's not going to put the bracket, okay? The question's you're going to see it like this in the question. But you have to realize this negative is going to affect 8, and it's going to affect minus 2y. So that's why I always like to put brackets. It saves me from mistakes. Okay, you ask yourself, do I have a common denominator? Well, we're lucky in this case, yes, we do. So we just need to simplify the top. So it will be 10y minus 1. Now minus 8, you have minus 8, and minus minus will become plus 2y. Remember, minus minus will become plus. Your common denominator is 4y minus 3. What's 10y plus 2y? That's 12y. And minus 1 minus 8 is minus 9. At the bottom, we have 4y minus 3. Now, I realize from the top, I can factor the 3 out. When you factor the 3 out, you get 4y minus 3. And at the bottom, I have 4y minus 3. But before canceling, you need to write the non-permissible. How do you do that? You take your denominator, 4y minus 3, you say it cannot be equal to 0. So minus 3 goes to the other side, becomes 3, then you divide by 4. So y cannot be 3 over 4. And then you cancel this. And you say your simplified answer is just 3. Does that make sense, folks? Do you guys understand this? Okay. Now, the next questions are going to be a bit more challenging, guys. So far, in all our questions, we had a common denominator. We had the same denominator. So my life was easy. Now it's not going to be the case. I've got 2x over xy plus 4 over x squared minus 3. And I want to simplify this expression. Now, guys, clearly, you can say minus 3 can be written as minus 3 over 1. So my denominators are not the same, so I cannot simplify them. We need to get a common denominator. How do we get the common denominator? Let me show you how. Well, what you're going to do is you're going to first look at your x terms. This is x squared. You're going to say, okay, what's the highest power of x? Highest power of x is x squared. That's going to be your common denominator. Okay, then you look at y. You say, okay, what's the highest power of y? It's just y. That's going to be part of your common denominator. Look at the numbers. What's the highest number? It's just 1. So you put 1. You don't need to write it. That's just 1. So what that means is your common denominator is x squared y. This is xy. I want to make it x squared y. Means you multiply the bottom by x and the top by x. How do I make this into x squared y? You multiply this by y and you multiply the top by y. What about this? Well, you multiply this with x squared y and you do the same for the top. So this becomes 2x times x, which is 2x squared. This becomes 4y plus 4y, and this becomes minus 3x squared y. And now you write the non-permissibles. I see x squared at the bottom. You say x cannot be equal to 0. I see y. You say y cannot be equal to 0. You can't really simplify this anymore, so that's your answer. Okay, do you guys understand this? It's very important that you guys understand this, folks. It's very important that you understand this part. Let's have a look at a few more questions. Next up, we have 4 over p squared minus 1 plus 3 over p plus 1. Okay, we want to simplify them, and obviously we want to write the non-permissible. I see we got p squared minus 1. That is, using difference of squares, you can factor this as p plus 1 times p minus 1. Right? Because p squared minus 1 is just p squared minus 1 squared, which is just going to be p plus 1 times p minus 1. Quite simple. Okay, and let's write our second term, which is plus 3 over p plus 1. Now, we want to get common denominator here, guys. So far, I don't have a common denominator. So you say p plus 1. What's the highest power of p plus 1? Just p plus 1. So that's part of my common denominator. Then I have p minus 1. What's the highest power of p minus 1? Just p minus 1. So that's also part of my common denominator. What that means is this term already has the common denominator, so this will just be 4. Now, whereas this term is missing your p minus 1. So you'll put p minus 1, you'll multiply the top and the bottom by that. So what that means is this becomes 3 times p minus 1. Okay? Always write the non-permissible. For p plus 1, your non-permissible is p cannot be minus 1. For p minus 1, p cannot be positive 1. Okay, let's simplify this. So this becomes 3 times p, which is 3p. And this will be 3 times minus 1, which is minus 3. So what's 4 minus 3 going to give you? Plus 1. And at the bottom, it will just be p plus 1 times p minus 1. Quite simple. Guys, another way of thinking about your common denominator is like this. Okay, I'm going to show it to you. You say, okay, this is going to be 4 over p plus 1 times p minus 1. And this is just 3 over p plus 1. So you're going to say, okay, my common denominator will be p plus 1 times p minus 1. This 4 has both of those, so you just leave it as it is. And you say, okay, what's this term missing? It's missing p minus 1. So you just do p minus 1 times 3, cross multiply. That's another way of thinking about it. Answer is exactly the same. So this gives you 4 plus 3p minus 3 over p plus 1 times p minus 1. So that's 3p, 4 minus 3 is plus 1, all over p plus 1 times p minus 1. Super simple. Does that make sense, folks? Okay, quite simple. Let's try another example. Let's try another example. We have x minus 2 divided by x squared plus x minus 6 minus, and then we have x squared plus 6x plus 5 divided by x squared plus 4x plus 3. Okay. So we want to factor this, and we want to simplify this, and obviously you want to write the non-permissibles. Everyone give it a shot. I want to see if you guys can try this one out. Let's go. Okay, guys, so this is what we have. As a first step, you should factor everything out. Okay, so we got x minus 2 here. Now, how do I factor x squared plus x minus 6? Well, what's 1 times minus 6? Okay, let me show it to you over here. We got x squared plus x minus 6. Number in front of x squared is 1. 1 times minus 6 will give you minus 6. Now we want to find two numbers. When you multiply them, you get minus 6. When you add them, you get plus 1, which is right here. So it'll be some combination of 3 and 2. You want the sum to be plus 1, so it must be 3 and minus 2. So you say, okay, this will be x plus 3, and the other one will be x minus 2. Leave this as a negative. Now we want to factor x squared plus 6x plus 5. Okay, how do I do that? Same thing, folks. You're going to take the number in front of x squared, times it by 5. That gives you 5. We want to find two numbers. When you multiply them, you get 5. When you add them, you get 6. It'll be 5 and 1. So we'll have x plus 5 times x plus 1 divided by x squared plus 4x plus 3. So 1 times 3 gives you 3. Find two numbers. When you multiply them, you get 3. When you add them, you get 4. It'll be 1 and 3. So you got x plus 1 and x plus 3. Now, before you do anything else, let's write the non-permissibles. Okay, we factored everything. Before we do anything else, let's write the non-permissibles. For x plus 3, you would say x cannot be minus 3. For x minus 2, you would say x cannot be equal to positive 2. For x plus 1, you would say x cannot be equal to minus 1. And x plus 3, you've already covered that right here. Okay, guys, now you say, okay, I want to add or subtract them. Do I have a common denominator? Not really. But guess what? This is x minus 2 divided by x minus 2. We can cancel them, and you get this 1. We got x plus 1 divided by x plus 1. We can cancel them. And after canceling, what are you left with? You're left with 1 over x plus 3 minus x plus 5 divided by x plus 3. Aha, look at this. We have a common denominator now. So you can say this is just going to be 1 minus x plus 5 divided by x plus 3. Okay, let's FOIL that. So you get 1 minus x minus 5 over x plus 3. So that's just going to be minus x, and 1 minus 5 is minus 4 over x plus 3. As simple as that, folks. You've simplified it. You've written your non-permissibles, and that is your answer. Does anyone have any questions here? Okay, good. Next one's also an interesting question. I see many people, they get nervous when they see fractions. You have 2 minus 4 over y divided by y minus 4 over y. Okay, guys, what I do is I say, okay, this 2 can be written as 2 over 1, and y can be written as y over 1. I'm going to first focus on this top expression. I'm just going to focus on this, okay? Forget about the bottom part. Just look at the top. Do I have a common denominator? I don't. So what's my common denominator between 1 and y? It's going to be y. So I'm going to make this into y. You times it by y, and you do the same to the top. You times it by y as well. So what would that become? That becomes 2y minus 4. And your common denominator now is going to be y for that. Simple. We're done with that. Now I'm going to focus on this bottom term right here. I'm going to focus on this term. So you say, okay, my common denominator between 1 and y will be y again. So you want to multiply this by y, and you want to multiply this by y. So that becomes y times y, which is y squared minus 4, all divided by your common denominator, which is y. Okay, let's factor this a bit. Factor the 2 out, you get 2 times y minus 2 over y divided by y squared minus 4. Using difference of squares, there'll be y plus 2 times y minus 2 divided by y. Okay, first of all, write the non-permissibles. Okay, you have this y as a denominator. You say y cannot be equal to 0. You see y plus 2 and y minus 2. You say y cannot be equal to minus 2. And y cannot be equal to plus 2. And you see y, which is already covered. Y cannot be equal to 0. Good. And now we will simplify this. It will be 2 times y minus 2 over y. And rather than this big division, I'm going to make it multiplication. And then you flip the terms. So y goes at the top, and y plus 2 and y minus 2 comes at the bottom. Okay, make sure you've written all the non-permissibles. Yes, we have. Okay, so now we're ready to cancel. Y and y cancels. Y minus 2 and y minus 2 cancels. And you're left with 2 divided by y plus 2. There you go, guys. That's going to be your simplified expression along with your non-permissible values. Okay, make sure you practice each question 3-4 times afterwards, okay? Now we're going to solve equations. We're going to solve the equations. First question we have is x over 4 plus 6 over x is equal to 3.5. Okay, again, guys, what I want you to do is I want you to just focus on the left-hand side. Forget about the number on the right-hand side. Just focus on the left-hand side. We need a common denominator. Okay, we need a common denominator. So what's the common denominator between 4 and x? That will just be 4x. Okay, so this term is missing x. So you would multiply this by x and multiply this by x. So you'll get x times x, which is x squared. Now this term is missing 4, so you'll multiply this by 4 and multiply this by 4, and 6 times 4 will give you 24. Okay, so we got the common denominator. This is equal to 3.5. In the next step, you're going to take your denominator, you're going to cross multiply, means it moves across and it lands at the top on the other side. So you get x squared plus 24 is equal to 3.5 times 4x. Okay, what's 3.5 times 4x? Let's multiply that out. Okay, 3.5 times 4 is 14, so that becomes 14x. I'm going to rewrite this as 14x. Now, let's bring the 14x to the left. So you get x squared minus 14x plus 24 is equal to 0. This is your simple quadratic equation. Let's factor that. Number in front of x squared is 1. 1 times 24 will give you 24. We want to find two numbers. When you multiply them, you get 24. When you add them, you get minus 14. I know it will be some combination of 12 and 2. I want the sum to be minus 14, so it must be minus 12 and minus 2. So you would say your factors are going to be x minus 12 and x minus 2. That is equal to 0. For x minus 12, you get x is equal to 12. For x minus 2, you get x is equal to 2. But you always want to write your non-permissible. You see, you had your x at the bottom, right? So you would say x cannot be equal to 0. Always check that the answers that you got are non-permissibles. If it's a non-permissible, you would reject that. Both of these are fine. They're not non-permissibles. So you would say, yeah, I have two solutions. X is equal to 12 and x is equal to 2. How can you verify these answers? If they ask you to verify this, guys, all you do is take 12, plug it in the original equation, and see if you get left-hand side equal to right-hand side. If it is, then you can say, yep, it's verified. This is a solution. You do the same for this. If you want to verify x equals to 2, plug it into the left, plug it into the right. If you get the same answer, you can say, yep, it's verified. Okay, but once you get the answer, as long as it's not a non-permissible, you should be fine. Okay. Are there any questions around this? Excellent. Let's move on to the next question. I want to see if any of you guys can solve this for me. My question is 3x over x plus 2 minus 5 over x minus 3 is equal to minus 25 over x squared minus x minus 6. Let's go, folks. Give it a shot. All right, guys, let's have a look. So what I'm going to do is, guys, I'm going to first focus just on the left-hand side. Okay, I'm going to focus on the left-hand side, and I say, okay, we need a common denominator for that. So how do we do that? Well, the common denominator will be x plus 2 and x minus 3. Okay, so what's 3x term missing? It's missing x minus 3, right? So you're going to take 3x and multiply this with x minus 3. This term right here, it's missing x plus 2, so you're going to cross multiply x plus 2. And now your common denominator is going to be x plus 2 times x minus 3. That's another way of thinking about it. Or you could have done times this by x minus 3, times this by x minus 3, times this by x plus 2, times this by x plus 2. You'll get the same thing. Okay? Okay, so we've got that. And now we're going to work on the right-hand side. I see a quadratic. I'm going to factor that. 1 times minus 6 gives me minus 6. So I want to find two numbers. When you multiply them, you get minus 6. When you add them, you get minus 1. Those numbers are going to be minus 3 and 2. So we can factor that as x minus 3 and x plus 2. Okay, perfect. So far, so good. Now that we factored everything at the top, at the bottom, I realize I have x plus 2 as a denominator here, and I have x plus 2 as a denominator there. X minus 3 and x minus 3. Before we do any canceling, let's write the non-permissibles. For x plus 2, you say x cannot be equal to minus 2. For x minus 3, you say x cannot be equal to 3. But guys, you know, whenever you see two terms with same denominators, you can actually cancel x plus 2 with x plus 2 right here. Similarly, you can cancel x minus 3 with x minus 3. Why can we do that? Why? Why are we allowed to do that? Let me show you something. You see, well, you can think of this. Another way of thinking about this is, you know what's going to happen? This is going to cross multiply. When it cross multiplies, it's going to land at the top right here. And then you'd be able to cancel with the bottom. Or you can just cancel right over here. Okay, so just remember, whenever you have full common denominator on both sides and they're the same, you can cancel them right here. And now we're going to simplify the top. 3x times x will give me 3x squared. 3x times minus 3 gives me minus 9x. Minus 5 times x gives you minus 5x. Minus 5 times 2 will give you minus 10. All of that is equal to minus 25. Let's bring the minus 25 over. So this is 3x squared. Minus 9x minus 5x is minus 14x. Minus 25 comes to this side, becomes plus 25. Minus 10 plus 25 is 15. Is equal to 0. Guys, we get a quadratic equation. So we got to simplify this. 3 times 15 gives me 45. I need to find two numbers. When you multiply them, you get 45. When you add them, you get minus 14. I know it's going to be something like 9 and 5. But I need the sum to be minus 14, so it must be minus 9 and minus 5. But don't forget, there's a 3 in front of x squared, so we need to divide them by 3. So this becomes minus 3, and this becomes minus 5 over 3. So the factor for minus 3 is simple. That's just x minus 3. And for minus 5 over 3, the number at the bottom goes in front of x, and you're left with minus 5. So you got 3x minus 5 is equal to 0. So for x minus 3, you get x is equal to 3. For 3x minus 5, what's going to happen is you say 3x minus 5 is equal to 0. Minus 5 goes to the other side, becomes 5. Then you divide it by 3. But you do realize, guys, you have to go back and look at the non-permissible values. It says x cannot be equal to 3. But over here, you got x is equal to 3. You say, nope, I'll have to reject this. Because this is my non-permissible value. I'm going to reject this. So my only answer is x is equal to 5 over 3. That's my only answer. Always check when you get your answer if it's one of the non-permissibles. If it is, then you're going to have to reject that. Okay? Make sure you guys go over these questions a few times. Okay, guys, next up we have word problems. Okay? This is a very typical word problem. Let's go through this first. Question says, Stella takes 4 hours to paint a room. It takes Jose 3 hours to paint the same area. To paint the same room, Jose takes only 3 hours. And the question says, how long will the paint job take if they work together? Okay, so this looks really complicated when you read about it. Guys, what we're going to do is, we're going to make a table. Okay, we're going to write Stella here. Okay, and then we have Jose. Guys, to paint one room, how much time did Stella take? Stella took 4 hours, right? And how much time did Jose take? He took 3 hours. Does that make sense? So Jose takes 3 hours and Stella takes 4 hours. Okay, then you're going to say, okay, how much of a room does Stella paint in 1 hour? Well, if she takes 4 hours to paint one room, in 1 hour, how much of a room does she paint? She must paint only 1/4 of the room, right? Only 1/4 of the room. And how much of a room does Jose paint in 1 hour? Well, he must paint 1/3 of the room. Okay? Do you guys understand this? And the question says, how much time will they take if they work together? So we're going to say, let the time taken while working together. So let's say when they're working together, we're going to say, let the time taken while working together be X hours. Okay, so we're going to say in 1 hour, she paints 1/4 of the room. Jose paints 1/3 of the room. Then we're going to say, okay, in X hours, how much of the room does Stella paint? Stella must paint 1/4 times X, which is X/4 of the room. What about Jose? Well, he must, in 1 hour, he paints 1/3 of the room. So in X hours, he must paint 1/3 times X, which is X over third of the room. Now we know in total, in X hours, they paint 1 room, which means X/4 of the room plus X/3 of the room should be equal to 1 room, because in total, they paint 1 room. So what that means is X over 4 plus X over 3 should be equal to 1, because if you add up their portion of the room, in total, they eventually paint 1 room. So they should be able to paint 1 room. And the next step is simple. Guys, the hardest part with these word problems is coming up with the equation. Once you have the equation, the rest is simple. We need to get a common denominator. 4 and 3 has a common denominator of 12. So this is missing 3. You do 3 times X. You get 3X. This term is missing 4. You do 4 times X. You get 4X. And your common denominator is 12. 4 times 3 is 12. That is equal to 1. So then you get 3X plus 4X is 7X is equal to 12. 7X over 12 is equal to 1. Then what happens? Cross multiply the 12s. Then you get 7X is equal to 12. Divide both sides by 7. You get X is equal to 12 over 7 hours. Guys, that's how long it's going to take them if they paint the room together. You will get this question or some version of this question on your test. I guarantee you that. Okay. This is a tough question. Solving, you see, once you get the equation, the solving part is super easy. But the hardest part is setting up this question. Hardest part is setting up this question. Okay, question said, Stella took 4 hours to paint a room. So you're going to say, okay, to paint 1 room, Stella takes 4 hours, or it takes 3 hours. Then you say, okay, in 1 hour, how much of a room does Stella paint? Well, she paints 1/4 of the room. Okay, and Jose paints 1/3 of the room. Okay, over here, I'm going to say, how much of a room? How much of a room do they paint in 1 hour? And then for the other one, you say, how much of a room do they paint in X hours? Right here. Okay. In 1 hour, Stella will paint 1/4 of the room. Jose will paint 1/3 of the room. And then I said, you know what? Let's say they took X hours while working together. That's what we're trying to find. So how much of a room would they paint in X hours? Well, in 1 hour, they paint 1/4. In X hours, it will be 1/4 times X. So X over 4. In 1 hour, Jose paints 1/3 of the room. So in X hours, he must paint 1/3 times X, which is X over 3. And if you add up the proportion of the room that Stella and Jose paint, the total should be equal to 1 room. That is the trickiest part. The trickiest part is getting the equation. And the rest is simple algebra. Can you guys understand this? Okay, you're going to have to work on this question at least 5-6 times in order to fully understand this, okay? So make sure you practice this one 5-6 times. Okay. Another typical question you can come across is a distance question, distance time question. Let's read through this question, folks. Question says, a train has a scheduled run of 160 kilometers between 2 cities on Vancouver Island. If the average speed is decreased by 16 kilometers per hour, the run will take half an hour longer. What is the average speed of the train? And the question, okay, that's it. That's all the question is going to say. So it's super important to visualize and draw it out, okay? First thing what you should be doing is draw something out so you can look at it and try to visualize what's happening. What's happening is you have this route between 2 cities. This is city number 1. This is city number 2. And the distance between these 2 cities is 160 kilometers. Now they say if the average speed is decreased by 16, so we don't know the speed of the train. What I'm going to say is, I'm going to say let the original speed of the train be X kilometer. Let the original speed of train be equal to X kilometer per hour. Then they say if the speed is decreased by 16 kilometers, the run will take half an hour longer. So you have 2 scenarios. Case 1 is when it's moving at original speed. Okay. So we're going to draw our case 1, which involves your train moving at original speed. And then you slow down the speed, right? So then the second case is when you reduce the speed. So second case is when you reduce the speed. Okay, so for the original scenario, let me draw a few things out. The distance is 160 kilometers, and your speed is x, right? We said let that be x kilometer per hour. So what's your time of original going to be? It's going to be distance over speed, which is going to be 160 divided by x. Okay, let's call it time original or time one. Okay, what happens in reduced speed? Your distance is still the same. It's 160. But then what you did was you decreased your speed by 16 kilometers. That means your speed now is x minus 16, because you decreased it by 16, right? Kilometer per hour. So what's your time? Again, it's distance over speed. But in this case, your distance is 160 and your speed has been reduced by 16, so it's x minus 16. They say when you reduced your speed, you took half an hour longer, which means T2 is half an hour more than T1. So what you can say is T2 minus T1 is equal to half, because it took half an hour longer. Okay, what's my T2? It's 160 over x minus 16. What's my T1? It's 160 over x, and that's half an hour longer, so that's equal to half. Okay, guys, rest is going to be super simple. We have this expression, and we're just going to simplify this now. What we're going to do here is we're going to get the common denominator. Actually, before we do that, you see, both of these terms have 160, 160, so we can factor the 160 out. So what would this become? This would be 1 over x minus 16 minus 1 over x is equal to 1 over 2. Always factor a number out, because it will make your calculations a bit easier. And now we get the common denominator of the inside part. Okay, you see this term is missing x, so you do x times 1, gives you x. This term is missing x minus 16, so you do x minus 16 times minus 1, which gives you x minus 16. And your common denominator will be x minus 16 times x. And all of that is equal to 1 over 2. Okay, guys, now look at this. You have x minus x cancels. And then you have minus 16, which will become plus 16. So you have 160 times 16. What's 160 times 16? That gives you 2560. So what you have over here is 2560 over, let's spoil this, x squared minus 16x is equal to 1 over 2. We're going to cross multiply. This 2 is going to go across, and this term is going to go across. So this becomes 250 times 2560 times 2. That gives you 5120. And over here, you get x squared minus 16x. Then you take x squared minus 16x, move the 5120 to the other side. And you say that is equal to 0. Now, guys, before you do that, let's write the non-permissible. You see over here, you had x minus 16. So you would say x cannot be equal to 16. You had x, you say x cannot be equal to 0. Okay, those are your non-permissibles. Now you got this quadratic equation, x squared minus 16x minus 5120. Guys, this is a really large number, right? So we're going to have to somehow find two numbers. When you multiply them, you get minus 5120. When you add them, you get minus 16. It's going to be really difficult to find that on our own. But guys, some of your scientific calculators, and make sure you have those scientific calculators, they allow you to punch in this quadratic equation and they spit out the answer. So make sure you buy one of those scientific calculators, okay? So what you do is you just punch in this equation and they spit out the answer. If you do that, you're going to get x is equal to 80 and x is equal to minus 64. Then you say, can my speed be negative? No. So you will reject this because this is negative. So you will reject this. Speed cannot be negative. So what that means is x is equal to 80. Guys, what does that mean? That means your original speed. Your original speed, now you found it. Your original speed is equal to 80 kilometers per hour. That means what's your reduced speed? Your reduced speed will be 16 less, right? Your reduced speed was x minus 16. So that would be 80 minus 16, which gives you 64 kilometers per hour. And the question was asking you to find the average speed. How do we find the average speed? Okay, how do we find the average speed, guys? you're going to add them and divide them by 2. So to find the average, you do 80 plus 64, add them up, then divide them by 2. Make sure you put brackets when you do that. And that will give you 72 kilometers per hour. This is a very typical question that you can get on the test, folks. Okay, it's a very typical question you get on the test. Make sure you practice this question 5-6 times. Okay, because there's a fair bit of algebra involved here, and you got to know how to set up your equation. So make sure you guys practice this at least 5-6 times. Okay. Okay, excellent. So guys, another typical question that you can get is an upstream or a downstream word problem. Let's look at this question. It says 2 kayakers, they paddle 18 kilometers downstream with the current in the same time that it takes them to go 8 kilometers upstream against the current. The rate of the current is 3 kilometers per hour. And they want you to find they want you to set up the equation, and they want you to find the speed of the kayakers. So the main thing is to be able to set up this question. Okay, what's happening is always try to visualize what's happening. Okay, so let's say this is your river. This is your river. Okay, and at the top, I'm going to write down your expressions for downstream, right? When you're going downstream, what's going to happen? This is downstream part, and this is going to be upstream part at the bottom. So, and what we're going to say is we're going to say, let the speed of kayakers be X kilometer. Let the speed of kayaker be X kilometer per hour. You see, they gave you the speed of the current, means speed of the river, right? They told you that speed of current or speed of the river is 3 kilometers per hour, right? They told you that this is 3 kilometers per hour. So how does that come into play? How does that come into play? Guys, what's going to happen is this. When you're going downstream, you have your own speed, which is X kilometers per hour. And then what's going to happen is this current is going to push you, right? The speed of the current is going to push you with its own speed, and it's at 3. So what does that mean? Your final speed ends up becoming X plus 3 kilometers per hour. When you're going downstream, your speed becomes X plus 3. Why is that? Because the speed of the water adds to your own speed. You're going down, water is pushing you down further with 3 kilometers per hour, so it adds on to your speed. So when you're going downstream, your speed becomes X plus 3 kilometers per hour. Now, what happens when you go upstream? Well, when you're going upstream, you're going at X kilometers per hour, right? But now what's happening is this water is actually pushing against you with 3 kilometers per hour. So it's going against you, it's pushing against you. So when you're going upstream, your speed actually becomes X minus 3 kilometers per hour. This is the main part that you have to understand. When you're going downstream, speed of water adds on to your speed. When you're going upstream, speed of your water goes against you. So you have to subtract the speed of the water. Once you understand that part, these questions are super easy. So what they're saying is 2 kayakers, they paddle 18 kilometers downstream. Okay, downstream, you traveled 18 kilometers. Upstream, you traveled only 8 kilometers. I'm going to make a table afterwards. Okay, now we're going to make a table. Okay, now that we know how things are going to work, I'm going to make a table here. So over here, I will make my upstream table. And over here, I will make my downstream table. Okay, so you say, okay, what was my distance that I traveled upstream? It was 18 kilometers. And what was my speed? Well, my speed was X plus 3, sorry, for upstream, I only traveled 8 kilometers. So upstream distance was only 8 kilometers. That was this one right here. And the upstream speed was X minus 3 because the river was flowing against me, against the kayaker. And what's the time for upstream going to be? It's going to be distance over speed, which is 8 over X minus 3. What about for the downstream part? Well, going downstream, they traveled 18 kilometers. And going downstream, what's my speed going to be? Well, it's going to be x plus 3 because the speed of the water is going to add on to the speed of the kayaker. Speed of the current is going to add on to the speed of the kayaker. What was the time taken for going downstream? Distance over speed. So it will be 18 over x plus 3. If you read the question, it said they took the same time going 8 kilometers upstream versus 18 kilometers downstream, which means the time is the same. So time is the same for upstream and downstream. So I can say from that, we know 8 over x minus 3 is equal to 18 over x plus 3. So what do I do next? You cross multiply. Okay, so this is going to cross right here, and this is going to go across right there. So you get 8 times x plus 3 is equal to 18 times x minus 3. Okay, now before you do that, why don't we write the non-permissibles? You know, x cannot be equal to plus or minus 3, right? I had x minus 3 and x plus 3. So those are the non-permissibles. Now guys, before you foil, you realize you can simplify 8 and 18, right? Both of those numbers can be divided by 2. So what's 8 divided by 2 going to give you? 4. What's 18 divided by 2 going to give you? 9. So you have 4, foil it, 4x plus 12 is equal to 9x, and 9 times minus 3 is minus 27. Let's bring the x together and number on the other side. So 12 is here, minus 27 goes to the other side, you get 12 plus 27. And over here you have 9x minus 4x. So what's 12 plus 27? That gives you 39. And 9x minus 4x is 5x. Divide both sides by 5, you get x is equal to 39 over 5. Kilometer per hour. Okay, x is equal to 39 over 5 kilometer per hour. That is the speed of the kayaker. What is that? That is the speed of the kayaker. Do you guys agree? Or speed of the boat, right? Speed of the boat or speed of the kayaker. Same thing. This is how you're going to solve those, folks. Okay, this is how you're going to solve those. Does anyone have a question? Guys, you will get this question on the test. I guarantee you that. I guarantee you will get this question on the test. So let me recap this, okay? What the question said was, the river has a velocity, the river has a speed of 3 kilometers per hour. These kayakers, when they go downstream, they travel 18 kilometers. In the same time as they take to travel 8 kilometers upstream. So you say, okay, going downstream, they traveled 18, and going downstream, their speed will be x plus 3. So time will be distance over speed, which is 18 over x plus 3. While going upstream, they travel 8 kilometers. Now speed is going to be x minus 3. Why? Because the river is going to be pushing against you. Time will be distance over speed, which is 8 over x minus 3. Question said they took the same time, means time downstream will be equal to time upstream. 8 over x minus 3 is equal to 18 over x plus 3. Rest is algebra. Cross multiply. You can simplify 8 and 18. Both of those can be divided by 2. So you get 4 here and you get 9 here. This becomes 4x plus 12. This becomes 9x minus 27. Bring the x terms together and the numbers on the other side, and you solve for x. And that gives you the speed of the boat. Okay, you will get this question on the test. Here's another word problem, folks. Question says sum of two numbers is equal to 25 and sum of their reciprocal is equal to 1 over 4. Sum of two numbers is 25 and sum of their reciprocal is 1 over 4. Determine the two numbers. Okay, so this is what you're going to say. We want to find two numbers, right? You're going to say let the two numbers be x and y. Let the two numbers be x and y. First question says sum of two numbers is 25. So x plus y is equal to 25. Then it says sum of their reciprocal is 1 over 4. Reciprocal of x is 1 over x. Reciprocal of y is 1 over y. And their sum is equal to 1 over 4. Okay, now what you can do is you can isolate one of the variables. So you can say y is going to be 25 minus x. And then in this equation, in place of y, you put 25 minus x. That is equal to 1 over 4. So now we get the common denominator. So you do 25 minus x times 1. 25 minus x plus x times 1. And your common denominator is x times 25 minus x. And that is equal to 1 over 4. And guys, look at this. Minus x plus x, it cancels. And now we're going to cross multiply. So this is going to go across and 4 is going to come across. So 4 comes across. You get 25 times 4, which will give you 100. And on the other side, you'll have x times 25 minus x. When you FOIL it, it becomes minus x squared plus 25x. I personally don't like to have a negative in front of x squared, so I'm going to move these terms to the left. So then we get to x squared plus x squared minus 25. We get x squared minus 25, x plus 100 is equal to 0. So we want to factor this. 1 times 100 gives me 100. We want to find two numbers. When you multiply them, you get 100. When you add them, you get minus 25. Okay, so that would be minus 20 and minus 5, right? You multiply them, you get 100. When you add them, you get minus 25. So you're going to say your factor is x minus 20 and x minus 5 is equal to 0, which means x is equal to 20 and x is equal to 5. Guys, essentially, these are your two numbers. So your two numbers, the two numbers that you were talking about are 20 and 5. You know why? Because you plug in 20 over here, your y is going to be 25 minus 20, which is 5. Or if you plug in 5, 25 minus 5, 20. So these are your two numbers. You will get this question on the test. Okay, that's also a typical question. Now, guys, here's a question that I want you guys to solve. Okay, essentially, what we're going to do is we're going to first just work on the left-hand side. Okay, we're not going to look at the right-hand side. We're just going to focus on the left-hand side. So what do we need to do? We're going to factor everything out. See, this is 3 minus x. I'll tell you what, I know already if I factor this, I'll get x plus or minus something. So what we should do is we should factor the negative out there, and that will become x minus 3. I know for a fact that that's going to help me. And at the bottom, I have x minus 5. Okay, this is minus 2x squared. Let's factor x squared minus 3x minus 10. What's 1 times minus 10? It gives you minus 10. We want to find two numbers. When you multiply them, you get minus 10. When you add them, you get minus 3. There'll be some combination of 5 and 2. I want the sum to be minus 3, so it'll be minus 5 and 2. So that means this will be x minus 5 and x plus 2. And that is equal to 2 over x plus 2. Perfect. Now, guys, again, just focus on the left-hand side for now. We want to get the common denominator. Look, I have x minus 5, x minus 5. That's common already. The only thing this first term is missing is x plus 2. So you take x plus 2 and you multiply it with the top, obviously with the bottom as well, right? So it's going to become minus x minus 3 times x plus 2. And this term has both of them already, so we don't need to do anything. Minus 2x squared. And now my common denominator is x minus 5 times x plus 2. And that is equal to 2 over x plus 2. Okay, then what's going to happen is write the non-permissibles. For x minus 5, you would say x cannot be equal to 5. For x plus 2, you would say x cannot be equal to minus 2. And guys, look at this. I have x plus 2 on both sides. So that will get canceled. Okay, and what do we do next? Okay, let's simplify the top. So it'll be minus x times x. Okay, you know what? There was no point of factoring the negative in the hindsight. So I'm just going to FOIL it back in and write this as 3 minus x. Because it didn't really serve a purpose. I thought it was going to cancel with something. But it didn't really happen. So let's leave it as 3 minus x. And we're going to FOIL it. 3 times x gives me 3x. 3 times 2 gives me 6. Minus x times x gives me minus x squared. Minus x times 2 gives me minus 2x. And then we have minus 2x squared. Okay, that's that after FOILing. At the bottom, I have x minus 5. Now I'm going to cross multiply that. I'm going to take x minus 5, cross multiply by 2. This will become 2 times x minus 5. Okay, let's simplify this. Minus x squared minus 2x squared will be minus 3x squared. 3x minus 2x will just be x. Then we have 6 right there. And that is equal to 2x. And 2 times minus 5 is minus 10. I personally don't like to see a negative in front of x squared term, so I'm actually going to move them to the right. Minus 3x squared goes to the right, it will become 3x squared. Minus x, when it goes to the right, it will become minus x. 2x minus x will give me x. 6, when it goes to the other side, will become minus 6. So minus 10 minus 6 will give me minus 16. That is equal to 0. So now we want to solve this quadratic equation. 3 times minus 16 will give me minus 48. We want to find two numbers. When you multiply them, you get minus 48. When you add them, you get 1. Okay. It seems we won't be able to solve this using right off the bat. So we're going to have to use scientific calculator, punch this in, and get our answer. So guys, when you punch it in your calculator, you get x is equal to either positive 2.15, or you get x is equal to negative 2.48. Okay. And clearly, what we want to do is you want to check if any of those are equal to your non-permissible values. That's not the case. So you will say, yep, that is my solution. So this was a good question, folks. Make sure you practice this 5-6 times. Okay, guys, let's have a look at this one now. We've got 3 over m minus 3 over 2m plus 3, all divided by 3 over m squared plus 1 over 2m plus 3. Guys, very similar to the question we solved earlier, we're going to first focus at the top, and we're going to try to get the common denominator. So what you're going to say is, okay, we need the common denominator. This term's missing 2m plus 3, so we're going to multiply this with 3 with 2m plus 3. So it'll be 3 times 2m plus 3. This term is missing m, so we're going to multiply that by m. And my common denominator will be m times 2m plus 3. Okay, so we're done with that part. And now we're going to focus on the bottom part. Right here, we're going to get the common denominator. So we do 3 is missing 2m plus 3. So you do 2m plus 3 times 3. So 3 times 2m plus 3. Plus 1 is missing m squared. So we do m squared times 1, which gives you m squared. And your common denominator is m squared times 2m plus 3. Before we do anything, let's write the non-permissibles. Okay, for this, m cannot be equal to 0. For 2m plus 3, imagine plus 3 moving to the other side become minus 3, then divide that by 2. M cannot be minus 3 over 2. For m squared, m cannot be 0. 2m plus 3, it's going to be minus 3 over 2. I've already written that. Okay, let's FOIL it now. 3 times 2m is going to be 6m. 3 times 3 is 9. And you have minus 3m. At the bottom, you have m times 2m plus 3. Okay. Divided by, let's FOIL this. 3 times 2m is 6m. 3 times 3 is 9. And then you have plus m squared. At the bottom, you have m squared times 2m plus 3. So we're ready to chain division to multiplication. So at the top, you have 6m minus 3m, which will just be 3m, plus 9. Over here, you have m times 2m plus 3. We chain the division to multiplication now, so we flip the terms. So m squared and 2m plus 3 goes to the top. This was 2m plus 3, by the way. And then this term is going to come to the bottom. So we have m squared plus 6m plus 9. So clearly we can factor a few more things here. We can factor the 3 here, and that will become m plus 3. And this is m times 2m plus 3 multiplied by m squared times 2m plus 3. And the bottom one is a quadratic. So 1 times 9 is going to be 9. We want to find two numbers. When you multiply them, you get 9. When you add them, you get 6. So it'll be 3 and 3. So essentially, it's going to be m plus 3 times m plus 3, which is just m plus 3 whole square, right? Or you can write this as m plus 3 and m plus 3. Always check, have you written the new non-permissibles? Look, I have m plus 3 at the bottom. So there's m cannot be equal to minus 3. We need to add that non-permissible. Always make sure you've covered all your non-permissibles, okay? Always make sure that. And now the rest is easy. M plus 3 cancels with m plus 3. 2m plus 3 cancels with 2m plus 3. You see, m is going to cancel with m squared, and you will just have m left. So what's your simplified equation here, or simplified expression? You have 3m at the top, and at the bottom you have m plus 3. And these right here are your non-permissible values. So guys, this is a good question as well, okay? Make sure you practice this 4 or 5 times. I've seen many people lose marks on these kind of questions. They get confused with denominators.